Hey everyone, welcome to the reality show, day 21 of the war in Israel. We are today discussing something similar to what we just discussed in the Daily Objective. The West has this idea that democracy is the solution to everything, and the West has acted on this idea. So America exported democracy after 9/11 to Afghanistan, to Iraq. In what was called the Arab Spring, it was exported to places like Egypt. It was um, kind of imposed or encouraged in the Gaza Strip, in Palestinian controlled areas, and the results are pretty much the same. So that is going to be our topic for today. We have a full house in with the panel today. There are six of us. I am joined by Amy Nasser, Jonathan, Nathan, Kirk, and Alejandro. Alejandro, your thoughts on democracy and how well it's working in the places where it's exported to, and maybe in the places that are exporting it.
So let me think in principle. I think the overall issue and the main concern that a government should have, it's in its own territory. And therefore, all the policies that it must enact and must enforce must be with that standard in mind. In that regard, maybe applying certain types of force towards other countries and then starting certain types of government in them is legitimate. However, the whole way that it's usually introduced, which is, oh, let's be one of the articles that you shared was George Bush's one of George Bush's discourse lectures in 2003. And one of the things that he was saying is, oh, the American sacrifice will bring democracy to the Middle East. I think that's a really inappropriate way to think about the issue. Certainly you can think about how are we going to um, bring or have more aligned countries with you, and what's the proper policy to do that. But at the same time, the standard is you and the way that and how to keep you safe. But if the standard is okay, we're going to be like bringers of peace, good Samaritans, bringing freedom to all people, that is really unfair and really unjust. And at the same time, it won't be very successful because people in that regions don't want that thing, regardless of whatever they are asking to.
Yeah, if the standard is you, it's a difficult sell to say, hey, go risk your life so that people in the Middle East can vote themselves into an Islamic theocracy that will then come back to kill us. Amy.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I agree. And I while I was thinking about this, I thought of all the different ways in how to illustrate what Islamic death cultists will do if you give them things that they are fundamentally in disagreement with. In other words, actual things like voting machines, for instance. So, if you give them printing presses, they'll print out calls to kill more Jews and Americans. If you give them a playground, they'll use the swing set to hang gay people. um Gosh, if you give them teddy bears, they'll put time bombs in the bears and give them to Jewish children. Let's see what else. If you give them high-tech medical tools, they'll use it for female genital mutilation. uh and then finally, yeah, if you give them voting machines, you can't just say, okay, we're giving you all these accoutrements and all of these tools and machinery to make you now a democracy. If you give them voting machines, they will beat and torture enough their own people that no one will refuse to not vote for Hamas as their political leaders. I mean, so this is such an intellectual failure of the West. I mean, we have been kidding ourselves for so many decades. Islam is a religion of peace. Not true. This is a death cult, and they basically worship Muhammad, who was a warlord. So we've been kidding ourselves for so long, and we've been telling ourselves these people are, they're reasonable. You can deal with them, and we ignore the fact that they've been brainwashed since they were children to be murderers, to be criminals, and I have more to say, but that's going to be my starting point.
Not that until October 6th, there was pretty much one topic of conversation in public discourse in Israel, which was the judicial reform. I think you and I probably agree that it was a bad move in the direction of totalitarianism in a sense, but not. I don't think it's a major step in that direction, but it is a step in that direction. But the thing that was weird to me was that the thing that the people opposing it were chanting in their protest was democracy, democracy, whereas in fact this was a reform that was essentially democratic. It meant that the people elect somebody and they have a lot more power than they had before. Just to put it in context, we were talking about how, what's his name? Thomas Friedman from the New York Times, when there was a talk about Israel signing some sort of peace deal with Saudi Arabia, says that Saudi Arabia shouldn't legitimize Israel at this time. And I think it's important to say that even if that reform had passed, Israel would be worse off than it was before, but still a much better place to be in than in Saudi Arabia. Nathan, do you want to pick up on any of that in the context of democracy?
I think sure. So I mean, I totally agree. I think there are really two premises that are being held by the West, or by dominantly in the culture right now, and they're both fallacies. I mean, democracy, first of all, that's a package deal, because we know that Ayn Rand defined democracy as unlimited majority rule, which is what democracy actually is. But most people, they hold just this kind of ambiguous, kind of vague notion of democracy. They think, it's a liberal state. It's they think, some form of rule of law, but they never hold any of these concepts in a really straight and defined manner. So they don't even understand that what makes what's essential about a liberal state is that it protects individual rights. They don't understand that democracy is it's antithetical to individual rights. So I mean, that's a whole mistake right there. But then I think Amy's concretization of the other premise, which is wrong, is really, really great, because there's just this really dominant view, which is really anti-philosophical, that people, they just think that, I mean, first of all, and I'd be interested in your take, because I haven't thought about this deeply yet, but people, they just separate politics from society. They think, there's the politicians, there's the government that does bad things, and then you have the people, the regular person on the street. They just all want the same thing. They just want to have a good life and to work, and we're all the same. And this is just really, really popular and dominant. Just everybody thinks this way. You don't understand what motivates people is not some psychological benefits or material wealth. What motivates human beings is ideas. It's the philosophical premises and ideas that people hold. And when you don't hold that, so you can read Hamas's charter, you can see that they explicitly, what motivates them, but people will just dismiss that because they don't think that ideas matter, that concepts have any reference in reality. So yeah, I mean, I want to throw the ball to you. And how do you tackle that, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I want to just quickly say on that. I mean, the fact that politics follows, the more fundamental branches of philosophy is it's not just in it's also a timeline thing. Like the culture needs to change, and then the politics changes. So in Israel now we don't see objectivism is not the dominant philosophy in Israel just yet, but we on this specific issue we do see people now saying, you know what, there's a consensus. Yeah, we need to destroy Hamas. It doesn't matter. People I used to say this to would say we can't do that. We're going to kill civilians. We're not like them. And now that has changed, but that has changed on one topic, not as a one political topic, not as a whole philosophical shift. But even that one shift hasn't happened in politics, because we see that we see the way the war is fought, and that is not the way that people are talking. So, yeah, Jonathan, your thoughts on what's going on? I think it's been more than a week since we've seen you. So, anything we missed, and also your thoughts on the West exporting democracy.
Watching and really enjoying and getting a lot out of all of your coverage. But to your point in our topic today, the West, obsession with democracy, of bringing democracy into the world, and almost this egalitarian sense of, well, any government's okay as long as people voted for it, right? As long as they voted for it, it's okay. And I remember, I think it was the Bush era where there was all those photos of Iraqis with their thumbs, and they had voted. It was supposed to be this big accomplishment. But, I have to say, this discussion is straight out of an essay in the book I helped publish, a new textbook of Americanism. Rand tackled this exact issue. And Greg Salmieri made the point that, and Natan, as you said, it is the principle of rights, not the mere will of the people, that makes a government legitimate. And, Greg goes into this whole purpose and this whole exploration in this essay called On the Role of Voting in the American System of Government. And it's not voting that is the essential element. I'm summarizing here, what makes Americanism and ultimately what makes prosperity and happiness. And it is that notion of individual rights. And I don't know whether it's that people are so afraid to kind of support individualism that they go for democracy. It's like to be for individualism is too egoistic. So it's just, well, it's just going to do a democracy and hope that people steer towards more traditionally Western first world ideas. But it's not voting; it's the principles behind the voting. And Razi, I think to your point, how many governments have been installed that have voted in the worst sorts of butchers? Hamas, just the latest of them, but I'd put Putin on that list as well. And Putin, democratically elected, tremendously popular, and a butcher in a business suit.
Yeah, we've seen these rallies, protests, whatever you want to call them, over recent weeks in Western cities in support of Hamas. Even if they won't call it that, that's what it is. There's a major one in central London tomorrow. I'll be avoiding that area. But this is not new. We've seen these for decades. We've seen them, especially when something is going on in the Middle East. We see them from time to time when nothing is going on. And I remember after Hamas was elected, those protests used to have posters saying "Respect Palestinian democracy," and this goes back to I saw John Was earlier in the chat. John, I've been quoting you pretty much every single episode on that statement you made, where they're using our morality against us, and by our morality I mean the prevalent morality in the West, and they use our words against us. We see that. This is something that, again, that this was the right in America saying the Bush doctrine was to export democracy to the Middle East, and we see the result of that. Kirk, should we respect Palestinian democracy?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's the will of the people speaking, and yeah, as we were just discussing, that's I guess that's the ideal. It's just democracy, mob rule, and yeah, that's what's great. American foreign policy is self-sacrifice, even as Bush pointed out in the November 6th, 2003 press release, where he straight up says, promoting democracy and freedom in the Middle East will be a massive and difficult undertaking, but is worthy of America's effort and sacrifice. Just to show once again that, yeah, sacrifice is kind of the moral standard that comes with altruism. And what I find amazing about this is that Rand was writing about this in 1966 in her essay Roots of War, where she talks about Woodrow Wilson and, George W. Bush. I think people need to start calling him George Woodrow Wilson Bush, because it sounds like he was operating on Wilsonian foreign policy, where she talks about how Woodrow Wilson, how the roots of war were ultimately statism and collectivism. And then after the war happens, everyone scapegoats capitalism and big business and war profiteering and all of that gobbledygook. And how, yeah, it was Woodrow Wilson who felt that the United States had some sort of mission and duty to spread its institutions and spread democracy throughout the world. That was in 1966. And then you fast forward to 2003, and here's George Woodrow Wilson Bush talking about how we need to spread democracy to the Middle East and how it's worthy of our sacrifice. And now that people look back at Bush's response to 9/11 and his foreign policy, people are often, people ignore this. People ignore what he was saying at the time, that he was preaching the morality of sacrifice and the wonders of spreading democracy, which has been a massive failure. And people say, oh no, the real problem was it was wars for oil. Bush just needed an excuse to go to the Middle East so that we could fight wars for oil. Or even today, when the United States is helping Ukraine, people cook up all of these conspiracies about how it's really the military industrial complex. And the only reason why America gets involved in war is so that a few weapons contractors can make a few extra dollars. So yeah, as others have pointed out already, people ignore the ideas, and it's unfortunate because it's right there in plain English. Bush is telling you what his motivations are, and people don't really seem to learn.
Kirk, I'll just jump in quickly. I mean, Greg talked about exactly what Rand talked about. Wilson, quoting from Greg Salmieri now, Wilson's attempt to promote democracy abroad helped set the stage for the formation of communist Russia, fascist Italy, and Nazi Germany. And America's recent attempts to promote democracy in the Middle East precipitated the elections by which both the terrorist group Hamas came to power in the Palestinian territories and Islamic theocrats came to power in Egypt. So, I mean, Rand was on this, as you said, in the 60s. Greg Salmieri was on this 10 years ago, and we're seeing those ideological effects today.
And I would encourage people to go watch the movie The Aviator, which is about the life of Howard Hughes. It's a really good movie aside from everything else, but there is a moment in the movie, like one of the most memorable scenes is when he's taken into court or taken in front of Congress to answer for his alleged war profiteering. And it's not a new phenomenon that capitalists and big business get scapegoated for war as a means of making a few extra dollars off the taxpayers or whatever.
You see why concepts are so important? I mean, concepts, if you form them correctly, they're an issue of life and death. If you equivocate between democracy and freedom, and then you try to push democracy and you only get unlimited majority rule in all these places, then, you won't understand what you're doing wrong. But if you formulated democracy properly, then you would then understand why these results keep turning the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Bush being accused of going to war for oil. I think we spoke about this. I'm still waiting to see the oil that's a result of that war. What people believe is it's interesting to say the least.
To go to war to establish a democracy so that the people can elect a theocracy which hates and makes war against you in the same way. It's such an unbelievable insult to, Kirk, to your point, the sacrifice we made of those men and women who died for that war. What an unbelievable insult to them that they're dying so that we could install a democracy which elected the same sort of terrible theocratic government.
Yeah, just a quick point about democracy in general. So, especially like the issue of voting. So we saw we saw what happened in the 2020 elections in the U.S., where one side didn't like the results and how some of them reacted. We saw. I'm sure you've all seen these videos of people over the past few weeks tearing down posters of pictures of the hostages, of children who were hostages. There were some who drew like Hitler mustaches on pictures of kids who were taken hostage by Hamas. And I saw one video a few days ago of a London, somebody in a London train station, about 15-minute walk from where I am, going around, writing something on it, and they were filming him, and then they turned the camera to see what he was writing, and it said fake news. Now, that guy is voting. So there's something with the idea of democracy and the power that the democratically elected leaders have that's frightening. What isn't frightening is the fact that we're getting some super chats. So thank you. That's what gives me some optimism towards the future. Thank you, Mary Aline. Thank you, Buster. He says, as far as I'm concerned, in a grand sense, European democracy is merely the plagiarizing of America. If anybody has, by the way, I'm going to read a few of these. If anybody has thoughts on any of them, please keep them in mind and chime in.
Well,
I don't get that.
No, I get it, but go ahead.
Yeah, do you wanna jump in quickly on your thoughts on that, and I'll continue.
Okay, so yeah, I mean well, it's sort of mouthing the words of a constitutional republic in Europe. Yeah, I don't think that they, especially with regard to our First Amendment being the freedom of speech and assembly and the press, and the British government and many European governments don't get that, for instance. So yeah, intellectually, they're mouthing the words a lot in Europe in terms of their take on what democracy or republic is. And yeah, so again, I think the United States really does stand alone, especially in our history now, with respecting individual rights and taking those ideas seriously.
There's a great line. I was thinking of it from Don't Let It Go. Rand says, talks about the differences between Americans and Europeans. A European is disarmed in the face of a dictatorship. He may hate it, but he feels as if he is wrong, and metaphysically the state is right. An American would rebel to the bottom of his soul. Defiance, not obedience, is the American's answer to overbearing authority. I hope that's still the case.
By the way, we have a super chat from Jonathan Honig, which I really appreciate, but I have to say, Jonathan, super chatting while you're on the show could cause a glitch in the space-time continuum. I'm not sure what's going to happen. We'll find out soon enough. Enric, you sent a super chat yesterday, which we read out. It was a question. I don't remember what it was. If you want to put it in the regular chat, because I read it out and we didn't answer it. So if you want to put it in the regular chat without a super chat, I'll read that out as well. But Enric today sends a super chat, and thank you for that. He says, Imperial Japan changed from religious totalitarianism to mainly respecting rights. It takes changing the culture and time. It can be done, but will it?
Yeah, I've got something on that.
Go ahead.
All right. So when I was listening to so Yaron Brook was in Tbilisi, and he did this really amazing speech about the war there, and he mentioned the idea of if you want to end a war, you need to completely crush your enemies, and you need to bring them to their knees, and then you need to, down to their bones, they need to metaphysically feel that their ways of violence and irrationalism aren't actually going to be effective in reality. And you think of that, you think of World War II, and I thought of Japan and Germany, and then he said, and that's what we did in World War II. Japan and Germany are now strong allies of the United States. And I thought to myself, how is that? How is that? How does anybody square that together? And I thought of the fact that back in the 1940s, we had role models. I mean, this is a silly one, but Superman, for instance, truth, justice, and the American way. There's no hesitation to actually defend ourselves and our values. And we knew at that point, at least, what our values were. We were a lot more intellectual with regard to respecting individual rights, even at that time. But my last point about this is that what we did in World War II was we showed that we were heroes. We were morally righteous. we didn't back down in front of a threat, and that we had more importantly the self-esteem to do all of this. And so when Germany and Japan see this, that we're not just, mealy mouth, weaklings who are trying to spread democracy and can't we all just get along? No, we were there to disable their criminality, to disable their irrationality, completely stop what they were doing, crush them. And thankfully we did. And I think that at the time, enemies who are that irrational will only respect that kind of moral strength. Unfortunately, I don't think we have that now. I hope maybe we can rediscover it.
Alejandro, do you have any thoughts on Enric's question on whether, well, he said it can be done, but will it? Yeah, of course it can, but will it? And if so, when, maybe?
I do. I think that a country can have several options whenever someone attacks it or it's about to attack him. And one of them is, as Amy says, invade them, conquer them, and then let the best of their societies bring up the best in them and then become a free country, such as Japan or Germany. Now, there are many options which you could bring as well. One of those is if there is a country which doesn't have any tradition of individual rights or anything, you just can simply banish it, and that's it. The other one could be if you have if you are surrounded by that country, like let's say Haiti and the Dominican Republic. I'm using that country because it's they share the same island. If, for instance, Haiti become hostile to the Dominican Republic, I think it would be desirable maybe for the Dominican Republic to take over Haiti and become it part of its own country because they are basically the same island. And I think the last thing is don't overestimate the power of becoming of being self-righteous in your ideas and your ideologies. And actually that probably it's more powerful than even invasion. And this goes a bit more towards the European question. Europeans usually think that America is something that practically emerged in the early 20th century, and that before that it was merely like a cute little country. That's not true. The emergence of America, especially in the 19th century, was really inspiring, especially in Europe as well, but many other countries see it as a beacon and something to be emulated. And I think it's probably an understudied area of history for objectivists in how America inspired several countries and also brought down several of the change that had Europe as well. So that in itself are the four basic things that I see that are important in how to bring down hostile or not aligned countries with yourself, aside of just playing war and bringing a better one on your side.
Nathan, last time you were on the show, we spoke about this topic or something similar, and I think we had a disagreement on how many years it's going to take, but there, how many years it's going to take until the culture changes in Gaza. But there's also the question of, I'll put it as harshly as I can, like, should we leave anything there to be changed?
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but I think that, militarily you can crush the enemy. You can defeat their motivation to continue to fight you. I think that's proven historically. But when it comes to actually changing the culture, so I'm not sure how much, to what degree or to what extent a military win can actually change the culture. I mean, sure. So Germany today is less Kantian than under Germany under Nazi Germany, but it's still Kantian. So even if you do win militarily, you will need to, I mean, the intellectual work doesn't go away. You still need to, tackle the most fundamental philosophical ideas, because otherwise, so you may, crush the motivation for decades, but sometime along the at some point they will rise again, these ideas, and they'll come back. So I don't know how long you need to it will take to extract the kind of mystic Islamic ideas from like how long will it take to get rid of religion? Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I don't know, but an enlightened culture, a culture of reason, could do it relatively fast. I mean, I think that if Ayn Rand lived in the Enlightenment, we'd probably be without religion today, or religion would be so much like in the back of the culture that it wouldn't even it would have no dominance.
So Mary Aline has been a member for 18 months. I always like it when I see somebody who's been a member for 18 months. Reminds me how long we've been, and this is a YouTube member. She's been a regular member for even longer. She says, I have a Muslim friend who admires women leaders. His best friend is gay, but he still hates Israel. I told him gays are murdered in Gaza. Yeah, we had that episode, which I think we actually shared with you when you asked, if I'm not mistaken. But or am I mistaken? But anyway, we had Ayman and I did a show. Why do so many people hate? Why do so many Muslims hate the Jews? I think that was a pretty good episode, and it's done pretty well. I think it's over 2,000 views and downloads so far. So yeah, definitely check that out. And we have a question from Apollo Zeus. He says, is politics downstream from culture versus ethics? I mean, I think, culture is downstream from ethics, and politics follows. But Kirk, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's always been my understanding. I think this phrase kind of got popularized by Andrew Breitbart in the early 2010s, that politics is downstream from culture. And I think a lot of culture warriors, self-proclaimed culture warriors, have run with this. And I don't think they often really associate ideas with culture, but yeah, I think that's ultimately where culture comes from. It's from the prevalent ideas within a culture, within a society, that ultimately starts with the intellectuals and academic world in a culture.
Yeah,
which I guess you could also apply it to spiritual leaders like churches and other religious institutions as well.
So just quickly to follow up, Kirk, when you look at Gaza and you think, back to Enric's question about changing the culture there, can it be done? Will it be done? How long will it take?
Yeah, I guess that's a separate question than kind of defeating an enemy like Hamas so harshly that it discourages the will for war for an extended period of time. I think that's a more difficult question of, I think someone asked in the chat, like, was the United States or the Allies involved with German or Japanese education post-World War II? I don't really know much about that, but yeah, I think that's a separate topic where you get involved with the ideas and the battle of ideas in a culture after you defeat an enemy. But I think that's a different question than defeating an enemy into submission to the point where they stop waging war against you and the threat of war is neutralized for an extended period of time.
Amy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I would just say simply that culture is an implicit expression of morality in general. I think it's derivative of morality. And then, of course, you have politics. But I want to jump to aesthetics, to art. And this is something also I know Yaron has been calling for, Yaron Brook. And I completely agree. We need to have more art. We need to have more storylines with clearly drawn heroes and villains. We need to have more beauty in the world so that people can be inspired to keep pursuing values. Yeah, we need to have more art that is life affirming, that supports individualism. Well, of course, not as a propaganda piece, of course, but as something that's going to give you that metaphysical value judgment and give you that emotional fuel, and give maybe the Arab world at some point some kind of like, some kind of inspiration, some kind of motivation to say, what am I doing? What am I doing to myself, to my loved ones, to my children? I mean, so yeah, anyway, the art can do that. Art does have that power. And I think that, like, for instance, a lot of the folks in Iran see that. And there are a lot of people in Iran who are ready for a revolution. And if Americans would just help them out, they could actually take that government over. I think there's enough of that there. I don't think that there's enough of that in Gaza. I don't think that in a lot of other areas, there's just not enough of that. But if we actually asserted ourselves boldly, as heroes, as not heroes to police the world, but heroes for the truth, justice, and American way, for instance, especially in art, especially in movies and music, that's going to help a lot.
I second that. And by the way, regular viewers of this channel will know that the Daily Objective, we have at least one episode a week that is sponsored by Quent Cordair Fine Art. We have not been doing that these past few weeks just because we thought, considering the content we do, it wouldn't make sense. We are still paying the bill, so we appreciate the super chats, and I will use this opportunity to promote some other things. So speaking of art, if you see this Capitalist Pig stock certificate behind me, I believe you can get this. Jonathan will tell you in a minute where. And I want to also tell people that next Wednesday, we will have another special episode of HBTV with Harry Binswanger. We'll tell you more about that in hopefully the next day or so. But that is happening. That will be one of those episodes where if you want your question or comment read and answered, we will limit that to £20 and above for super chats. Jonathan, your thoughts, and please tell us where we can get.
My final thought is just, to Amy's point about the difficulty of changing a culture, and how makes me think of that comment that said to Rand when she left Russia. I believe the story is that an old man said, tell them in America that Russia is a graveyard, that we're all slowly dying. And here, 100 years later, the culture still hasn't changed there, as against the transformation in Germany, in Japan. I mean, these are countries where my parents grew up. They were avowed enemies of the United States. They were killing, Americans left and right. So, cultural change is possible. It's only possible, I believe, on the ideological level. And that's why I have to say I'm always so impressed with students of objectivism from around the world. I know we've got them from around the world who watch the chat, watch our channel, not just from the UK, but from the Middle East and Far East and everywhere. I mean, because you've probably been grown up in an environment and or a culture that's a little less individualistic than even America is. So the fact that we have people who are interested in Rand and learning and pursuing these ideas from around the world, probably a lot of cultures that aren't very individualistic. You are the real rebels, you are the real iconoclasts, and we hope that we're a great resource to inspire you to continue to read Ayn Rand.
And our viewers are inspiring us to continue to read the super chats because there are quite a few of them today. Thank you again, Mary Aline. Mary Aline says, the book, The Hajj by Leon Uris is amazingly perceptive and informative on the Arab-Jewish issue. It's heartbreaking. All right. Megan says, were the allies involved in I'm also reading some of the non-super chats, and I think I might read some of them out. Were the allies involved in post-World War II German or Japanese education? If not, how was the culture change affected? That's a very good question. I'll in a minute go to anybody who knows the answer to this. But yeah, when I think about what post-war Gaza should look like. If anything remains there and Israel allows people to remain there, which I think is there's a question mark over that. Then whatever. If it's not imposed, it should certainly be filtered. You can't keep telling your kids that they have to murder the Jews from the moment they're born. That should not be allowed. But yeah, anybody more knowledgeable than me about the education system in Germany or Japan post World War II?
I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, I can just imagine that when you execute, such a profound and unconditional surrender, when you submit the enemy, they might think, well, our ideas did not work. Why were they able to defeat us? And then they just start to emulate you because they think, oh, well, those ideas are more powerful. So I think that's one thing that can happen. I mean, they may not understand the principles behind the ideas that they're trying to emulate, but at least, I'm sure that a military win can have that effect.
Isn't that the irony? I don't want to jump in. Isn't the irony of the Middle East is that you have the Islamic theocracy living in the past, angry at Israel? How are they so successful? How are they so wealthy? Not understanding it's because they abandoned their theocratic ideas. They're modern, they're technologically advanced. So there's just goes back in time to this idea, those basic fundamentals that why are they so successful? Just discounting the role of ideas in that process.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Israel never won any of its wars. I know this may sound weird, but so Israel won militarily, but it never extracted any price from the regimes that it defeated. So, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, these regimes never paid the price for starting a war against Israel. So this fundamental change of regimes never happened in the Middle East because Israel never actually won their wars. They only managed to defend themselves militarily, and they crushed the militaries of the enemy. But yeah, they just never went all the way through.
Egypt paid the price of losing Gaza, so that's quite the price.
Yeah, I've got a little snippet here. I just looked it up. So basically, between 1942 and 1945 and 1952, in Japan specifically, basically it was led by General Douglas MacArthur. They enacted widespread military, political, and economic and social reforms. So they went in, occupied Japan, and they led the Allies in the occupation and rehabilitation of Japan. So that was 7 years that took. I don't know if that's something I don't know if that would be something that would be necessary, say for like Iran, or I don't know any other countries if that would actually be necessary, but especially if we showed them, no, this is what is morally right. Retaliation and crushing you as our enemies is morally right. And we're going to do that. And actually showed some or a great amount of self-esteem in doing. I think that would go a long way.
The irony of all of this is that Iran has actually a very large population that's secular. They're pro-secular values. I'm not saying they're pro-individualism necessarily, but I mean there could be a turnaround that's fairly quick if the theocratic regime was taken down.
There was a lot of criticism, I believe, during the Islamic Spring. What was that a decade ago, that Obama and other Western leaders didn't speak up at the time.
Yeah,
but perhaps they should have.
Well, they spoke up in favor of the Arab Spring and of democracy. But yeah, Robert Nasser, I'm wondering if you're like quoting this from memory, but he posted Enric's question from yesterday, the super chat question, which is, are there rules of war beyond winning? I'm going to quickly give my answer. I think it is winning with as few as little cost on your side as possible. And you have to define what victory is in the particular war. but there are also rules. So something I hear from the it's protect innocent civilians thing when I say something like this is, oh, so you say soldiers can do anything, they can just go in and rape and so on, and I'm like, no, that is the savage's way of life. That is what we're fighting against, and that's not a rule of war. That's a rule of basic human decency and the laws of a free country, that you can't do that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's my answer. If anybody wants to jump in, Alejandro.
I agree with you, Rasib. And I think, but it's not the rules of war what you're thinking about. It's rather the correct behavior of your country in war. And I think it's rational to impose certain limits on the brutality that you have, because you want to preserve discipline, and also you want that the civilian population has some doesn't have gather a certain rancor against you, or at least rational rancor against you. So that's one of the reasons why you should be not behave like a savage in war. But at the same time, that means that your standard of value, the way that you should be thinking about as many casualties from your soldiers as possible, and then consider all the rest is subject to consideration.
Mary-Aline, thank you for the additional super chat. She says, I'm not looking for advice on talking to my friend Omar. I just wanted to give an example of how deeply ingrained the hatred is. Yes, I mean, even, I've known Amen for many years, but I was surprised by that episode and by our conversation afterwards with the things he didn't want to say on the show itself. Robert Nasser has also been a member for 18 months, and he says, we need a special edition of the reality show with Amy, Megan, Jennifer, and Jax. No men allowed. They'll tell y'all how to end this damn war. So the problem with that, Robert, as you know, Hamas is watching this show on a daily basis, and they're not going to watch a show that's just women. So
no, they will. They will. Actually, the Iranian women will certainly, they'll take off their hijabs and then they'll watch us. But yeah, I mean, no offense to any of the gentlemen on the panel, but yeah, it would be fun. It'd be fun. Put Linda Cordair in there as well.
Yes, Linda.
I'd watch it.
Yeah, Nathan, go ahead.
Oh, I said I'd watch it.
Yeah, and the people of Iran, as we said, it's not just the women of Iran. I think Iran is the one country where many of the people are actually on the right side of things, and hopefully the West will be on their side, at least the good people there. Thank you, Gail, for the super chat. Thank you, Mary-Aline, for another super chat. Akira says in a regular chat, you think Israel has the moral certainty to destroy Gaza, Razi? No, of course not. I'm saying what I think they should do. And I say with a heavy heart on pretty much every show what I think they will do, which is either very little or something that will be very, very destructive to Israel that I'm really afraid of. So yeah,
by the way,
I'm not optimistic, Nathan.
By the way, I read a tweet. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but it's a report of someone who's who's spoken to Hamas leaders. They had these conversations, and according to this report, they're still in euphoria. Like they believe that I mean their motivation is super high right now. I mean, even though Gaza is completely, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going on in Gaza, but it seems like there's a lot of destruction there. But they're just really motivated. They're in euphoria. They think that Israel is going to lose. They still anticipate Hezbollah joining in. So I think we're really in just the very beginning of this war.
So you're more optimistic than I am.
I not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to people in Israel, they want this to happen. They want it to happen now. You know, there are gonna be fewer restrictions on what soldiers can do probably than usual, but still way more than there should be. And but yeah, you know, if people think Hamas doesn't know how to prepare for things, I think October 7th proved otherwise. That is, you know, Gaza is their home court. You know, Israel has uh, excellent knowledge of everything that is above ground and some knowledge of what is underground, at least map wise, but not probably not complete knowledge, and certainly not knowledge of what is booby trapped, what is you know, where are the soldiers, the terrorist soldiers at any moment, you know, what kind of weapons they have, is it all you know, conventional weapons? I think it's yeah, again, on the one hand, I think a lot more should be done than is currently done. On the other hand, I think uh, the more that Israel does, the type of more that Israel is likely to do could be really, really disastrous for Israel. So,
Why hasn't Israel bombed the Shifa hospital yet? Why is it still standing? Like it should have been bombed the second day or the same day. So
yeah,
the Hamas headquarters are you know they're in the
yeah,
underground tunnels.
or a day before. So we talked about this on the Daily Objective today, because Israel did a press conference for the foreign media showing the Shifa hospital, showing where Hamas headquarters is, and you know, the very fact that this press conference happened showed that Israel is more concerned in winning the war of public opinion in the world, a war which Israel will never win, than winning the military war, a war which Israel could win but will never win because it chooses not to. So yeah, that really infuriated me. If you know they're there and you're not acting, it's on you. I mean, and yeah, that's a really sad thing that happened today, and I don't understand how there's no uproar. This is why I say, you know, even when Israelis are right on one issue, you know, there's been a shift, and now Israelis say let's destroy Hamas. There isn't the full philosophical shift that will that is needed. Uh, any last thoughts from anybody on the panel before I go to our last super chat?
Yeah, I can say something real quick. I think it's really important to understand, for Americans specifically, this is for an American audience and maybe a British audience as well. There are a lot of ideas in psychology, such as, you know, you've got abusers, you have enablers, and then you have people with self-esteem. And it's really important, I think, to make, you know, not just a moral stand and say, I would like to have Israel carpet bomb Gaza right now. I think it's more important to state the principle and phrase that in a personal way, and say to people, you know, you might support Hamas, but for me, when I see a child who is in danger in the States, when I see some, you know, a dog on the road, I will not run the dog over. I will stop and try to get it off the road. And when I see some injustice, if I see somebody at work who is treating another coworker unjustly, or in a way that is even racist or whatever it may be, I will, if this is in my realm of moral agency, I will say something. I would not be able to live with myself or look at myself in the mirror if I didn't say anything. If I was a social worker and I saw that that children were being beaten and tortured by their parents, oh yeah, I would be saying something. I would have the moral fire and the courage to actually do something about it. And I think that most Americans do. I think, though, that Americans fundamentally do not understand the nature of evil. I think there's a lot of anti-intellectuality and a lot of complacency. You know, why not give the Palestinians the right to vote? because we live in 2023. Obviously, there's wonderful things around us. And, this is the American state of mind of course, they want freedom. Of course, they don't want to have, use their babies as human shields. Of course. A lot of people just don't quite understand that level of evil unless you give them concrete examples of the moral agency that we do have in the United States and how generally Americans actually respond to injustices that they actually see in their personal lives. So that's my ending thought.
And Nathan, you have something to add?
Just one small thing. There's a great article by Alex Epstein exactly on the general topic of our discussion today. I forget the name, but I can send the link after the show. You can put it.
And we have two last super chats. So Ashley Shrugged says, girls show, girls show, girls show, and sends several what I assume are girly emojis. And Apollo Zeus says, a total man's show, Pellegrino, Razi, Honig, Alejandro, Kirk, Nathan, Howard Rourke, John Galt. Okay. Yeah, ARCUK's new show, The Objectivist Gender Wars, premieres next week. By the way, I'm offended on behalf of all the genders that weren't mentioned here, but we are running out of time to mention all of them. But we do have time if anybody else has any final comments before we go. And if not, then we will be back. We will hopefully be back tomorrow and Sunday. Weekend shows are a bit more difficult logistically to do, but I will aim very much to do them. And if something major happens, we will do them, maybe not even at the regularly scheduled time. But we, again, should be back here tomorrow for the Daily Objective, no reality show on the weekend, at 5:30 UK time. So that's 12:30 Eastern. And then on Sunday, if we are doing a show, it will be at 6 p.m. UK time, which will be 2 p.m. Eastern, because we are switching to daylight savings. And this is going to be, yeah, for all our viewers and hosts who are in the US, it's one of those difficult weeks that government impose on us a couple of times a year, where we realize how difficult it is to add or subtract one. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining us, and we will see you again tomorrow.